All right, folks, we're back with another episode of the 6 Yard Line podcast with my co host and I, Noah. And Noah is back from his little trip last week, his European away trip. Hopefully, we'll wait till the end and talk about that. How's that? Instead of we'll tease everybody to give them something to listen to before we get into that game.
Yeah, we'll definitely cover that because interesting few days. Got to spend an awful lot of time with a lot of Forest fans, so we're going to cover Forest today, about from the weekend's game. But again, yeah, it's great to obviously just to be watching your games live and this you know I think I messaged you when I was in the stand. I really miss this, so
I
it's
could
good.
imagine. It was definitely inspiring, knowing you were there. But we're not here to talk about Europa League or Champions League or any of that stuff. We're here to talk about last weekend's uh, match week 23 of the English Premier League. And for you and your Forest fans, uh, you had a good result at home. You guys were home,
Away.
right?
No, we're away. We're at the
Sorry, my
Gtech.
bad. You guys were
Yeah, we were.
you were on the road at the Gtech against Brentford, a Brentford team that has surprised both of us this season. Did you watch the whole match? Because I didn't see the whole thing.
Yeah, I did. Because you know what? After the Thursday night debacle, you kind of felt like because the reaction from Thursday was, we'll get into it in a bit, but the reaction from the Forest fans on Thursday, the club and the players clearly understood all that. So I was kind of interested to see what they would do because against Brentford, obviously, Brentford, I think what they're eighth in the league now. We tipped them to go down because we didn't think they had enough quality, and then they've been the surprise package of the season, I think, along with Sunderland, to be up there in those European spots and playing well. And I think everyone was kind of, what's Forest got? What are you going to do? Because you need to get some wins. The pressure was applied to them early because West Ham had already won 3-1 earlier in the day, so the pressure was there, and I think that was the biggest part of what happened on Saturday, was the fact that West Ham had already won, and you kind of like Sunday. You kind of already had that feeling that the pressure's on. They've got to get a result. They've got to get 3 points, and I felt that they had to score early. And I think Forest obviously do go up early. They literally had one chance, one goal. It's a great goal. Like Igor Jesus, he scores in Europe. He scores in the other cup competitions, but only had one in the Premier League. So I think that's been the problem all year. Obviously, Chris Wood's going to be out now, I think, for the remainder of the season. So I think that's a big blow, and I think it was something that not everybody kind of seen. But when you're missing his
Right.
goals in the season, I've said it to you 1,000 times this year. I think we've definitely struggled with scoring goals, and that's been the difference between this year and last year. I think if you can finish teams off, which they haven't been able to do, or just be able to get that odd goal back and get a draw out of games where last year Chris Wood was doing that. But credit to Igor, he missed Thursday, and then that chance he took it on the spin, real proper number 9 to finish, and it was a great goal, and it's very much against the run of play. I think Brentford really bossed that game for the most parts of it, but Forest held their own. And then, it was, kind of Forest weathered the storm for a bit. And, Brentford never really made Forest panic, but they definitely did keep the pressure on. And then you get to late on in the game and, he was making subs, Daishi was making subs, and he brought on Taiwo. And the goal for Taiwo was, completely against the run of play. That was, I think, the first time Forest had the ball in the Brentford box in like the 78th minute in the entire second half. So it was really, backs was against the walls. I think Murillo was man of the match in central defense. And then Taiwo takes it down, gets in the box and has, a cracking finish, and bang, it's done. 2-0, and you call it a day. And, if you're a Brentford fan, you feel like you should have got something out of that game. I think if their finishing was, I think their final ball into the box was what let Brentford down on the weekend. But
Right.
Forest can only do what they can do. They are the second lowest scorers in the league, and I think the biggest thing that you need to address is getting goals. And a win after West Ham, say, already put the pressure on to keep that at 5 points. I think it's a good result, and you know what, they needed it. And I think the Forest fans, we met a bunch. Actually, I met a bunch of them in the Lisbon airport on Friday that were heading straight to Brentford. So I was like, that's pretty hardcore. So it's really interesting to for the fans, because they obviously did have I think 3,000 or 4,000 down there at Brentford. So it was it was a pretty strong turnout, and it's good to see them get a win, and they needed it because the pressure is certainly piling.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because after seeing West Ham get that result the day before, I felt that, like, Forest at this moment, you guys, going into the game, are only 2 points ahead of them. So it was a game you could not afford to drop points. You had to get, and to be honest, you couldn't even say a draw would have been acceptable. You had to get the 3 points. You have to continue to keep the distance with West Ham, and hopefully try to kind of pull away from them. They are playing well. They've got 2 back-to-back wins. Good results for them if you look at who they played. But we're not here to talk about West Ham. You guys got the result. I did see the second goal, and I thought that was a hard-fought, well-earned goal. He like that. He is like, I'm going to score, and no matter how you try to defend me, you're not bringing me down. You're not stopping me. Because didn't he kind of get through 2 defenders to get?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he hustled past, and I like Taiwo. I just think he's not suited to the Premier League. I think he's one of those guys that in the Championship would do fantastic. He really wants to play in MLS, Sean, and I keep thinking, why can't we just sell him to TFC? Just sell him to Toronto FC. That would be great. No, I think at the end of the day, they needed the 3 points. They got the 3 points, and then this weekend they play Palace, who are 3 points in front of us, who are on a hell-bent of a slide down the league. And so, you get 3 points at Palace, at home to Palace. You can put Palace in it, and then you're up to 13th or 14th. So that whole bottom half of the table, I think at one point you and me were sitting here saying, well, it's clear it's going to be Wolves, Burnley, either West Ham, Forest, Leeds, or somebody else. But now you're starting to see, Tottenham's at 28 points, Palace is at 28 points, Leeds at 26 after they draw with Everton this weekend with 1-1, and then Forest on 25. So if Forest can beat Palace this weekend, that puts them at 28, and it then drops Palace into that fight with West Ham, Leeds, and yeah, it's critical. You just got to keep everybody around you. You've got to pick up points. You know what I mean? So yeah. I think it's a fantastic result.
I mean, that's you can't deny it. It's going to come down to literally every week, every team is going to be fighting and scraping to gain points or to avoid dropping points. When you go up against, like you said, a Palace who, if you do beat them, now you're on level points. Like, that's stress for them. And we already know all the issues that's going on with there. Like, we see it constantly. A coach that is just asking to be fired, but for some reason the club is just like, no, we're good. Keep status quo.
Yeah, you know what? Let's just have a quick 2 minutes on Palace, because they are a very interesting case right now. Because obviously, since we last recorded, Glasner came out and said he's leaving. They sold Mark Gay to Manchester City, so he's gone. I believe today Forest bid 35 million for Mateta, the striker. And then on top of that, I think Warrington's out. I think he got a red card, so he'll miss the Forest game. Their current record is horrible right now, right? I think if you look at it, obviously they're the holders of the FA Cup. They went out to Macclesfield. I think you mentioned it last time we recorded. And then if you look at their Premier League, the last 6 has been a loss, draw, loss. They're in free fall. The players are on exodus. It's a recipe for it all going wrong really quickly. And Glasner, as you pointed out, is looks like he's trying to get himself released early to take a vacation before he gets his new job, wherever that may be. But I think he's done himself no harm. But the longer he stays at Palace, I think the more he does his next job a little bit of harm. But you know, again,
It look to me, it's one of those bad marriages, like where everybody knows you guys just need to get a divorce and like walk away, but for some reason they just want to string it along unnecessarily. Like, and I don't think it's benefiting anybody. At this point, you have to try to stop the bleeding somehow, right? Um,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
your coach doesn't want to be here. He's made it quite clear, and his actions continue. In every press conference, he finds some way to kind of say, "Hey, like I want out." It makes no
Well,
sense to me. You just need.
what I do think is interesting is the rumor is that he could end up at Spurs and Thomas Frank could end up at Palace, which I think that would be quite entertaining.
Okay, are they going to Is there going to be a trade, like a transfer for
No,
coaches? Or what?
I think they're going to stack them and then they're both going to appoint the other ones because I think at the end of the day, if you take Thomas Frank to Palace, I think I think he'll do well at Palace. If you put Glasner at Spurs, he might do better than Frank. So I don't think it's a bad move, but I think at the end of the day, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I could see that quite easily happening. Them trading managers essentially without any sort of weird sort of fees involved. At the end of the day, neither of them want to keep paying managers that have just got new jobs, right? So I don't know, but Palace are in free fall. Forest have an opportunity, and if they can sign Mateta this week before the deadline of the day, that would be fantastic. Because if he comes on and scores, it would just really alienate all the Palace fans even more. Who today I do find funny have been trashing him, saying he's streaky, he's inconsistent, and then last year he was a god. So I do find it pretty funny how fickle football fans are.
Oh, the love hate. Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, before we move on to the next game, let's get into your away trip to Portugal to see Forest in their Europa League game. Yeah, you were messaging me. I did see photos of you and your dad. You guys were, I know, we're having a blast, having a few pints, I'm sure, with all the other Forest fans. How was it?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, forgot how good away games are with Forest. Just you know, you kind of go, oh crap. It was I think Wednesday night. We were going out for dinner. We went into downtown Braga, and we were at one end of the town square. It was pouring rain because it poured rain for 4 days straight, and all I could hear is the song Ian Wone, like he's got no hair, we don't care, we're off to Istanbul. It was just I could hear it across the square. We go in, we walk around, and there's probably 300 Forest fans in a bar singing their hearts out with their $4 Euro pints that the locals put on, which I thought was fantastic. And everyone was having a good time, and it was it was just kind of built the hype, and I was making fun of. I forgot how English the English are when they leave the UK. It's pouring with rain, and they're still wearing their shorts and their Forest hats. So I just I said to my dad, "Oh my god, I forgot how funny you guys are." So it's been a while, but no, again, the result wasn't what we wanted. They lost 1-0 to Braga. Braga didn't even have a shot on goal. It was a Ryan Yates own goal that gave them the lead, and Forest played the B team and they paid the price for not having any strikers. And I think they're paying the price for Nuno's temper tantrum at the start of the season with the Euro squad. I think he wasn't good enough. You can't play without a striker. You need a striker. That they played that, the 4-3-3 essentially, but almost like a false nine really at times, and it just didn't work. And I will say it didn't really because the rain, and I will say this, the rain was so heavy and was so consistent. It maybe didn't rain for 2 hours in the day. So that pitch in the condition wasn't ideal for passing football. So, again, it's the old school days would have been if you had a guy like Chris Wood or someone that can hold the ball up and hoof the ball downfield, that would have been a better game. And I think Forest really only had players like, they had McAtee on, and the fair comment from a lot of the Forest fans are he looks like he's a Manchester City player with the short tiki-taka short balls. What you need is a long ball over the top and let somebody run onto it, which would be Dan and Doy, Bakwa or one of those guys. And they never really played that way because I think it's not the right conditions for that. So they struggled, and I will say, honestly, that stadium was really cool. My dad didn't really like the stadium too much because if you don't know, Braga has 600 steps, so it was a bit of a killer. It was like climbing a small mountain to go up the hill to get into the stadium, and then when we got in, you had to go down. So it was pretty cool. It looked pretty awesome, carved into the cliffs there, and it was pretty epic from that standpoint. But yeah, you know what? It's I will say I did have a lot of really good laughs. Met a lot of people. Met a lot of Forest fans. We had some shows. So shout out Andy and the boys, and Susan, and a couple of guys that I met at the airport recognized us, and it was really great to kind of chit chat and to shoot the shit with those guys. It was really fun. So they kept me entertained. My flight didn't actually turn up to Switzerland, so I ended up having to go to Lisbon from Porto, and then fly direct from there. So yeah, it was a 25-hour journey to get home. So it was pretty epic for getting back. But I actually, just Porto Airport on Friday morning was just packed with Forest fans. So I had a lot of great conversations. I think everybody I talked to wanted to talk about various things. Sean Dyche is a very polarizing manager appointment from the fan base. I think Dyche's on a very short leash with, I think, a lot of Forest fans. I don't think the style's
Right.
working, and I don't think everyone's quietly enamored with him. Yes, he loves the club, but I think a lot of players and a lot of fans are like, we want something different. I think an awful lot of people told me they expect Marco Silva to be in charge of Forest at the end of the season because his contract is coming up with Fulham, and obviously he has history with Mr. Marinakis because he hired him at Olympiacos. And so a lot of people kind of had that thing. And then the other thing that I got to meet was Edu, who happened to be in our hotel. I happened to hop in the elevator to go down to reception to get something. So I had a 5 to 10 minute chat with him. So I did actually thank him for if you could pass on thanks for the club for helping me get tickets for that game. Obviously, it was a bit of a struggle trying to come from Canada to Portugal with not being a season ticket holder. So I did ask him to pass on that thanks. And then we did have a conversation about the players not performing and players, the style of play and the transfers. I don't think he liked my summary. I said I think we had too many managers, too many different styles, and I don't think it's working. But can you please fix it? And can we get a new striker? And at that game they did announce that they obviously got the striker from Napoli, Luca, coming in. So that's that's one thing that's positive. But you know what? He was very kind. He listened to me rant for 5-10 minutes, so I thought that was pretty cool. If you haven't seen my socials, there's a picture of me and him on there together. But he was very cool. I thought it was very thing. And my dad was over the moon when we saw the Forest coach rock up to our hotel. You're like, oh, they're here. So it was pretty epic for him, and pretty cool for us. And beautiful hotel, beautiful town. And again, we just had an absolute blast. And again, it's one of those things that you and I say it all the time. Away days are the best days. That was the first time in a very long time I got to do it in the UK with a Premier League team. But obviously, we do it a lot with Toronto FC, and we love those away days. And it's just a reminder why we do, because you get to go and explore a new city, get to go and see things, you get that camaraderie, and then you obviously you get to go to a game and support your team away from home, and
It's
a blast.
like especially for us, a road trip isn't just to go see the game. The game is the icing on the cake. It's you get a chance for a couple days to be in a new city, have just get out and have some fun for a couple of days. It's, you and I, it'd be amazing to be able to do it in Europe. But yeah, I can only imagine what an experience it was, and the fact that you got recognized from our show out there. Shout out to those who do follow us and watch us, and aren't afraid to come say hi, because you know what, Noel might like to rant every now and then, but he is a good guy.
No, you know what? I loved it, right? And it's just, again, it's just I realized that, it's one of those things that being passionate about your team is, right? And I think that's you can't take that out of somebody.
Yep.
I was talking to a lot of guys that, I was talking to two older guys in the cafe, and they're just saying, you know what, it's just, the inconsistency of performances, the inconsistency of players, the recruitment hasn't been right this year, and people, they're mad, they're angry, and then they're like, yeah, but we're off to Brentford on Saturday, straight from the airport. So it's just, it's the passion. It's what we are, and I just absolutely had a blast in the thick of the chaos, and I do miss it, and I think even for my dad, like there's somebody that I follow, Emily May, who you might not know, but is on the BBC East Midlands. I follow her on Instagram and Twitter and all those things, and bumped into her while she was making fun of the Braga police that dressed like RoboCops. So I got to, go and have a few-minute conversation with her. And again, it's just, you always look at it and go, you know what? It's just, I love being in the chaos of it. I love being back in that feeling. And it's been too long, and I think, I need to do that a little bit more often. So maybe not this year, I don't think, because I think by the time my next trip to England will be when the season's pretty much done. So I think maybe unless I can squeeze one in before the end of the year, but I got to talk to my wife about that.
As usual, hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and don't forget to hit the like button and give some feedback. We're loving the communication, and like I said, you can say hi to Noah when you bump into him on the airport or at a game or at some kind of away trip. Hopefully,
Yeah, I do appreciate it. It was very nice. It was very nice to get to talk to people, and that's a big thank you for the guys that do watch us and support us, and it is very much appreciated.
Well, I mean, you and I have somewhat experiences locally with regard to Toronto FC and some of the other stuff we've done with, whether it be the Twitter Spaces show or a podcast. So it's always cool when somebody who you've never, if you walk down the street, you wouldn't know who they were, but they can recognize you simply for what we do here. So, thank you. We appreciate all of you. And that's it for me this week. Noel, anything else?
No, thanks. It's good to be back.
All right, folks. That's it then. Catch you guys next week.